Hello everyone, welcome to our 8th climate clinic. This one is looking at emotions and how those are linked into kind of the planetary crises that we're currently facing, the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis especially. So I just had a little bit of my aloe vera at the beginning because we'll be talking about not only some of like the big things going on in eco-anxiety and kind of responses, but we'll also be talking about kind of methods for looking after yourself and ways to deal with some of the fairly legitimate emotions that come out of such a frightening and vast topic. So we will continue on with the presentation. So frustration is the most commonly felt emotion according to this big study that was done in Finland, which I've got linked at the bottom there. You can just about see it. But anyway, these were some of the responses from people that took the survey. Strong feelings of frustration. 70% of people felt that. This is all about the climate crisis, by the way. Strong feelings of frustration. 60% basically said they wanted to change. 50% said they were feeling grief. 50% feeling inadequate. 50% feeling powerless. And above 40% feeling angry, anxious, or scared. And I think all of these words are emotions that at any given point I've personally experienced with regards to the climate crisis and biodiversity crisis and just the overall planetary crises that we face. I think it's really hard not to have some of these emotions, but I've included this slide at the beginning to let you know if you're watching, you're not alone. In fact, you're probably part of a majority, but we'll cover that in a little bit. So, what are we going to talk about now? So, Caroline Hickman, she is kind of a lecturer at the University of Bath, and I've met her twice now actually, and she's amazing. She's really amazing. She is a psychotherapist, and she's kind of become the forerunner of opening a conversation about eco-anxiety, at least within the field of psychology and psychiatry. And so she's one of the key members. It's called the Climate Psychology Alliance, and it's a kind of international movement of psychologists who are working on eco-anxiety, which is an increasingly common problem that people are coming to their psychiatrists with. Their psychologists with. Terminology. Anyway, and yeah, her big interest has been interviewing younger people around the world, especially school children, to get their views, partly because she sees the perspective of young people as kind of unhindered by that entrenched worldview that lots of other adults currently live within, this kind of dissonance of the threat with our lifestyle, whereas children have grown up integrating those two things together. So I'll just move my head. There's a great TED talk she did. Great TED talk she did, and if you get a chance, go have a watch. So 45% of children suffer lasting depression after surviving an extreme weather event or natural disaster. And one thing we know about the climate crisis is it's making these events a lot more common. There were flooding in the UK earlier this year even, and it's been eclipsed already from our memories, but not from the memories of especially the children and the people who lived through it. And around the world there's increasing incidents of severe hurricanes and tropical storms, coastal flooding, and these are all extreme weather events, and they're leaving the world with kind of a lasting mental impact, is what her research suggests. And so she's in interviews got quotes from like school children, so I've included some of those to read. We won't discuss them much because we haven't got time, but at the end, if you want to have your own discussion, that might be a good idea just to have a think about it with someone else, because they're a bit harrowing. So this is a quote from a school child in the Maldives. We saw online that people in Iceland held a funeral for a glacier today, but who is going to do that for us? Don't they see that we will be underwater soon and our country will be gone? No one cares. How can you grieve for ice and ignore us? And I think it's such a woeful statement that a school child would say this, but it's incredibly true. and we shouldn't forget that the perspective of even mainstream environmentalism is heavily orientated towards impacts on people living in the West or the global North, whatever you want to call it, and there's people across the world who will be impacted physically a lot more by our changing climate. This is one from a school child in the UK. He's 10. You created me, and now you must face the consequences. You spoilt the planet for the children and the animals. Now I'm going to spoil it for you. Adults have made the world a worse place, so now I'm here for revenge. It's really quite frightening that a school child would say this, but you have to consider how unheard they might feel, and the way that that's led them to become like this. And you know, it's really important that we start to have a conversation about how people are feeling with regards to climate change. And if we don't, you know, people are going to keep bottling these feelings and hiding them, and it could be really, really bad. So yeah, this is a quote just to give you the idea. There are definitely young people with some really, really serious emotions that have got to be dealt with and acted upon truthfully. So here's another thing. Climate change is like the bug spray of nature, and people are the bugs. It's another school child from the UK. And my takeaway from this, and Caroline Hickman's takeaway, which was kind of a positive on it, was that this generation of children, they're better able than any other to empathise with the natural world. And that's why a lot of them come from the perspective of you know, siding with animals or with the ecosystem. And yeah, that's a very hopeful thing that the youth are so in touch with, or empathising so much with, the plight of nature, in my eyes at least, anyway. So Climate Psychology Alliance, this is kind of their leading body for talking about eco-anxiety and other emotions that might come from the climate crisis, because it's not just anxiety, as we saw at the beginning. And so they've got lots of tools on their website. I've included a link at the end, and I'd really recommend having a look through, but I've just kind of copied and pasted some stuff from their website to look at in a bit more depth. So you are not alone. There are lots of other people who might be just as traumatized as you are, and I use the word traumatized because there are some people who, quite genuinely, myself included, until I started to do things a bit differently a few years ago, who had some really, really serious feelings deep down inside of themselves that they weren't talking about because you don't think anyone else feels the same, but there are a lot of other people who feel exactly the same. And lots of other people are distracted by their jobs or by the busyness of their immediate lives. And so, you know, some people are better shielded from the reality that surrounds them because they haven't got space to even think about it. But it's an uncomfortable truth, that the way that we're living and the way that it affects the planet and the way it affects our future as young people especially. And, you know, it's a truth that lots of people accept or are processing, even if they're not outwardly talking about it all the time. So you're not alone. And that's key. So if you're consider yourself an activist of any description, these are good tips for everyone, really, with regards to eco-anxiety, because I think, you know what, everyone's an activist in our own little ways. If you planted some seeds on your windowsill, you're an activist. If you were out on the streets marching, you're an activist. If you said to your boss, oh, would it be okay for us to get recycled paper, you're an activist. I think that being active towards a change of system defines you as an activist. So I don't think it's a restrictive label. But anyway, do's. What are some of the do's that the Climate Psychology Alliance recommends? Take care of yourself physically and spiritually. So I think this essentially means, you know, you've got to be checking in with yourself all the time. And if you're not looking after yourself, the physical bit that is you're not going to be able to do anything, you know, in the long term for yourself. You're just going to be wrecking yourself. So get outdoors and enjoy some of that greenery that you might want to be saving. You know, enjoy your plants. I love my aloe vera. It makes me very happy. So, you know, if you haven't given yourself some space to enjoy the green things, maybe do. It's like natural for us to enjoy them. You're not alone. And I think a good way is connection. So connecting with other people who feel similarly, get together to do things that aren't necessarily pertaining to climate change, but they're the people that understand, and at a point where they're willing to have a conversation about it as well. And you'll find a lot of support through that, and through, making connections with other people who are like-minded. And don't just do stuff that relates to climate change or activism or whatever, because it can feel, once you start doing it, it can feel really good, but you can burn yourself out, and look what happens. You're going to end up having a windowsill full of plants, and that's a wonderful thing, but it should never take over your life completely. And my plants haven't taken over my life completely. I've still got some walls left, but it's about balance. Don't overwork yourself and take yourself away from other tasks that you might need to do. Don't stay up at night researching climate change stuff if you're struggling to sleep. If you're not struggling to sleep, might as well keep reading it. But if you are struggling to sleep, which I think a lot of people who are processing emotionally all of this stuff, it's difficult to sleep. So I would say try reading some Pulp Fiction, because for me that worked great. I just read something that doesn't really matter particularly, and I get tired and I sleep. Don't believe you're invulnerable. Just because you care a lot about something doesn't make you any less vulnerable than anyone else to really finding life difficult. And you're not always going to be happy. You're not always going to be fulfilled or joyful or whatever. And that's the key. If you experiencing signs and symptoms of burnout, often it's the people closest to you that will let you know. They'll say, "Are you okay?" Listen to other people, and when they're worried about you, take it seriously, because you can't take anything for granted. So there's a great quote from them, and then we'll just do a tiny little bit more at the end, and then that's it for today's Climate Clinic. So this is a quote from the Climate Psychology Alliance, and it says, "Your fears are realistic, but what you can do, or what you may expect to do, may not be." And my takeaway from this was, you might expect the world is going to go terrible, you're not going to do anything about it, might not be. Or you're doing loads and loads of stuff, you're working really, really hard, but it may not be. We might not, really create a great world, the one that we want to see. And both of those scenarios are realistic. We're really at a crux here. And that's why your fears are legitimate. And if you're anxious, any rational person would be. And the reason sometimes others aren't as anxious or visibly, worked up about this stuff, they're just not in the same place as you, or maybe they don't have the same space to think about these things. But I think you find a lot of people with the space and the time and the privilege to really think about those kinds of things. There's some emotions flying high. So my tactics, we'll just do a little bit at the end. So some of my tactics that I've done this year for helping me, and they have helped me a lot actually, finding a community of my own. So I've joined Sustain at BL, which is a medics sustainability society, which was good for me in my course. I did a drag act. You can see my coconut bra that I made, and that was like an artistic way of getting out some of my emotions. And I think art's fantastic for getting out emotions, or writing, or just kind of any kind of artistic expression. Doing fun things with friends, like I fixed my bicycle, I got a bicycle, having fun with it, and it's just a little bit of fun. It doesn't matter too much. I could always get the bus if bike doesn't work, but it does work. And climate striking stuff, being active, it actually makes me feel better, and it's cathartic, I'm doing what I can do. But there's also a bit of honesty in here. I don't spend all my time thinking about climate change. I was very unwell earlier in the year, and I do all kinds of crazy stuff, but haven't got time for that. The world's not perfect, that's all I'm trying to say, and no one person is ever going to be happy all the time. There's a bibliography at the end. I hope you enjoyed today. I'm sorry I've only got 3 seconds, but have a good week.